Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to see all of these faces in the crowd. My name is Annette Frost. I'm the director of the Favorite Poem Project here at BU, and we are very excited to have you for our 39th semi-annual Robert Lowell Memorial Poetry Reading with very special guests tonight, Monica Youn and Sara Daniele Rivera. We cannot wait to get started. I just want to mention in the spring we have a reading coming up. Please check back on our website for the dates. And in January we have an event called Poem Jazz Con Salsa at the Regatta Bar in Cambridge with special guest Francisco Mela, Afro-Peruvian percussionist. That's going to be very exciting. So I will now ask the founder of this series and of the Favorite Poem Project, Robert Pinsky, to please come introduce it.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Annette. For the record, Francisco Mela is Cuban, Afro-Cuban rhythms, but I'm very proud to be doing poem jazz with him. Welcome to all of you. I hope it's okay for me to mention that I suspect I may not be the only person who in the course of today wondered, did I really want to go to a poetry reading today? I felt terrible. But I'll tell you how I spent a good part of my day. I reread The Blue Mimes by Sara Daniele Rivera. I reread From by Monica Youn. I don't know if the right phrase would be that it cheered me up, but it encouraged me in the root of the word courage. Both of these books engage the subjects that we are well accustomed to being treated by pundits on screens: immigration, ethnicity. Early in one of the books, January 6th is mentioned. Really, just about every bit of cultural issue that is behind and governs political issues. I saw a quote from somebody today saying that politics is downstream from culture. And one reason I felt encouraged by these wonderful books, by these two quite terrific, impressive poets, is I saw the nature of poetry as having beauty, no matter how ugly the subject may be, and by being free of cliches. Cliché is literally an industrial term. It means the piece of metal. It's French for the slug that makes, it's pre-thought. So what you hear, even the good journalists, to say nothing of the stupidest or most scurrilous propaganda, the same topics are dealt with in these books by these two poets in ways that made me feel, okay, now poetry has to engage A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. I don't need to say the alphabet of topics. And I'm here to tell you that these two poets made me in a day that is unhappy for me personally. They made me happy in my art, and that I know these people. One of them was my student. When Nancy Livingston, who's one half of the donors of this series, when she and I worked to devise it, Nancy she's no longer alive. Nancy was a great expert in advertising and publicity. Very distinguished career of that kind. And she didn't like the euphemism public relations. She said, I'm good at advertising. She asked me things about the BU creative writing program. And I mentioned room 222, where we still have our creative writing classes. And she was very interested in that room, in our, I think, true mythology. Robert Lowell taught a creative writing class, in which the students included George Starbuck, Anne Sexton, and Sylvia Plath. And Nancy said we should call it the Robert Lowell Memorial Poetry Readings in the spirit of room 222. We've embodied that spirit by having an alum of the program, in this case, Sara Rivera, introduce our distinguished guest, in this case, Monica Youn. So you will hear a relatively brief reading by Sara Rivera. Then you will hear, she will then introduce Monica, who will give a somewhat longer reading. I hope that my heartfelt remarks about the art of poetry in relation to what we call current events, I don't just hope, I'm confident that those remarks are an effort in the spirit of room 222. And when Lowell was teaching that class with those, the part of the folklore, which you've heard me say before, is that afterwards they went down Com Ave to the which was then the Ritz Hotel, and got drunk together. The joke was, we always parked in the loading zone. We said, it's okay, we're here to get loaded. The spirit of something in the academic structure, this is the teacher, these are the students, but not entirely of that structure, I think is part of the spirit. And that's why I feel very, very proud and happy to introduce Sara Daniele Rivera.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Annette. Thank you to the BU program for having me today. And thank you to the BU program for having me 12 years ago when I landed in the middle of the night in a city I'd never visited and woke up, ready to try this program, which was a place where I met so many people who I love very, very dearly, some of whom are here, some of my dear friends and mentors like Robert. So I'm going to read just 4 poems from this collection, which is my first collection, The Blue Mimes. And the first poem I want to read is the poem that is part of the cover of the book. So this book contains line drawings by me and some line drawings by my dad. And these are line drawings of lucuma seeds, which is a Peruvian fruit with these really beautiful glassine pits. And I started drawing them when I was in Lima in 2014. So each little seed has a fragment of the poem underneath it. Semillas de lucuma. Seed pits lined up, each a word I learned incorrectly or not at all. Aquí no se dice así. Una fruta típica de acá. Shred texture, days punctuated by loss. The right thing to say or do, as elusive as a taste unremembered. I always believed I walked multiple worlds, but I lived in pre-translation, waiting for names to drop into my mouth. I'm sorry, a veces me equivoco. My slight and rotating catalog of apologies. How to be an archive of things no one thought to tell. I woke up this morning with the last couple lines of this poem in my head, so I figured I would read it. And this is about the year that my best friend and I discovered we had sleep paralysis the same year, and it happened to be the year we weren't speaking to each other. So we thought there was something inside that. So this is Sonnet to Sleep Paralysis after John Keats. It began for us, hushed, that year. You and I insisted on seeing each other, then sat slack with the unsayable. Retreat to separate apartments, mirror our way across rooms, nightbirds singing, as the world folded itself and stained us like two halves of a Rorschach. When we woke, we were not butterflies, not people, only the center of a cleaving. Mine was an old woman in the corner, bisabuela, I was sure. Would she leave me alone, please, out of love? Knitting dread, yours against your chest, a saddled demon barreling black. This is the language our minds create when we hold everything back. Identical vaults. You need each other, the phantom says. Que no se les olvide, says bisabuela, through the transparency of her head. When you have sleep paralysis, you get hallucinations. If you've never had it, it's terrifying. This poem borrows imagery from the myth of Mamaquilla, the Incan deity of the moon, who was the protector of women, the calculator of the passage of time. And I was inspired by Monica's use of myths, so I figured I'd read a poem that had some mythic imagery in it. This is called Quilla. A silver blue star at the bottom of a glass, a blood spot. Something shed from the body transforms, crawls away on red wire legs. A dark stain blossoms on your face, tunnels inward and becomes a blankness in your brain. Border between tonalities of skin. I press your body to my face mid-ascension, reasoning we were never human, always foxes holding too hard to our sources of protection. Darkening can be a trace of love. In a dust storm, darkening can be a loss of dimensionality. In the before of our family, twin sisters died, one at birth, the other something to do with an earthquake. Nameless halves of a swept unit, salts left midair. Silver and silver and silver, the teardrops flood their containment. I skip stones at the edge of Callao, sling language across the blue. I knew you, I wish I knew you. A plane of water dazes after a stone has sunk. I've begged the animal inside me to release its captive light. I've hurled this toward you out of silence, attempting contact with what I will never touch. A body lodged behind an eclipse. I have one more poem and then one little tiny end poem, and then I'll introduce Monica. This collection is elegiac for me, and many of the poems are memorials to people that I lost over the course of writing it, which was also a period of collective mourning and loss in this country. And this poem sort of, I wrote it across many of these personal losses, and it's called Naufragios, which in Spanish means shipwrecks. Does anything really begin? The house, clinking window frame in the last of canyon wind. Does anything begin? The day a room becomes a field, the day a field fills with water, the day you fall through yourself. This is how you say it, and how to respond to responses. I'm sorry you capsized inside your body. That must have been terrible. Your left hand starts swelling nightly, the body now filled with unfamiliar and inflammatory substance. You scratch until skin scabs at 3 lined up points. Orion's belt, pinpoint self. You're comforted by the symmetry of your smallest wounds, how you can keep scratching them open and have a little composition to keep you company. This is only the surface of the skin. Under moon, The season's first monsoon sequences the sky. Flash of rose, then begin the drenchings. Pain, salvage, sink, caveat, absence. They open and plunge into the depths of your body, that system of caves. It was so fast for you. How did you catch your breath? One after another, you lost the people you loved, as if they occupied a single vessel and entered the destructive radius of a storm. Now nothing holds its water, nor its salt, nor such heart. Nothing has weight, but everything is an aspect of an unmovable weight. There are parts of the ocean no natural sunlight penetrates. In the basin of grief, you receive a dream where you try to distract the dead with inane conversation, holding them, but not long enough for them to realize they aren't meant to be anymore. In the basin of grief, these dreams are the hanging light of an anglerfish. Behind the contained luminous target, a waking trap and teeth. You gather the memory shatterings, the regret you caught wandering your interior, the flakes of scab that fill your self-same shipwrecked body. There are days you are the only person who remembers there was ever ocean in this desert, where the dampening of fossils under rain becomes the only reminder that everything lost was once alive. Gray crests over a hill, clouds in thinning sheets, mountains black. You become a field, then the air above the field, integration of wound and dark, and one stone dislodges from its burial sands. This last teeny tiny poem is for my dad, because I always read one of the poems in the collection for him. This is called Resuscitation. For a second, jackrabbit prints on snow, and you're in the frame again, lifting your arms to lower the sky for me. On this side of Bridge Street, we collect all the dead sunflowers, cut rot from an amaryllis bulb to end its dormancy. Our box turtle wakes thin in spring. Asleep all winter, she witnessed nothing. For a second, small as a strawberry, all my dead are alive. Thank you so much. And thank you to my baby for being chill. Cute, the Lion King music. I read Monica Youn's third collection, Black Acre, a few years ago as I was working on this book. And there's a line that I held onto from the final sequence of poems, which are built off the N-words of Milton's Sonnet 19. And the one I saved meditates on the word wide. In a dark world, the wide is the sudden door that opens on unfurling darkness, the void pooling at the bottom of the unlit stairs. Robin Cost-Lewis wrote that Black Acre transformed English itself, a vast landscape of repressed histories, into a seemingly Black Acre too, an unexplored site. And as I read this book, I had a sense of this yawning open, of emptiness braiding itself up through the body of each poem until it came in contact with a boundary, and the poem's form illuminated the shape of that center. Black Acre moved me with its precision, its constraint, the way it interrogated non-places and gone places. The sensibility develops in From, Youn's symphonic collection that centers on the experience of deracination. In her interview with the Between the Covers podcast, Youn said, "Deracinated identity for me is an empty space. It's an empty space that is contained in a shell, and the shell is the interface with whiteness. The interface with whiteness, also the interface with other racial identities, causes you to be defined as Asian without the guts of it, without the deep connection to homeland or belonging that I feel other people have access to and that I never have." Monica taught me an ineffable thing, how to write about what we don't have. How when we name an emptiness and the container around it, what we begin to see is composition. What we thought was formless within us starts to take form. A meticulous attention to form, syntax, and sound distinguishes Youn's language. In section 2 of From, she employs what she's called the sonic landscape of the word deracination, infusing these vowels and consonant sounds and rhythms into the verse itself. Shh, sit down next to me, try to read. In her Study of Two Figures poems, she juxtaposes paired figures in mythology and pop culture and uses that counterpoint to control the build of an argument, the progression towards a fracture. Of her rich variety of artistic influences, Monica says, "My life is filled with mythology, etymology, and literary references. When I'm living the experience, I'm living it through Milton or Peter Pan. And when I see these things out in the world, I recognize aspects of my life." And I love this idea that mythology and narrative can act as frameworks by which we navigate our lives. The last little thing that struck me as I was reading through so much of Monica's work was one last quote from her interview with Bomb Magazine, and I liked it because it took me back to middle school math class. And she said, "I was trying to be honest, or as honest as possible. I think the mantra that I had in my head at all times in all caps was show your work. Show both what you know and what you don't know. Show your learning process and your sources. Show the partial perspective, the inner conflicts, all of it." It isn't so different from something Louise Gluck said to me when I was her student here, to not let poetry be just the cream top of the yogurt, but the substance underneath. It's no surprise then that one of the things I find most striking about Monica's poetry is the way it lays its progression of thought bare, the incandescent architecture, to borrow another phrase from Blackacre, of her poetry across her 4 collections, which have given so many readers a place they can enter to locate themselves. So it's one of the greatest honors of my poet life to be Monica's pressmate and to share space with her tonight. So everyone, please welcome Monica Youn.
I am so filled with gratitude over what is surely one of the great introductions, and just generally to be here. To Robert for inviting me, to Annette and Annika for making the journey such a pleasure, to everyone who joined us for dinner, to the students who I got the chance to meet this afternoon. Thank you for being here on a night when I know that many people would like to be holding themselves close, holding the people they love close, talking this through, trying to process as I myself am. I wanted to start by reading a poem that I wrote about a week after the 2016 election. And I really loved what Robert was saying, because in 2016, I was relatively fresh off of having been an election lawyer, which I had been only a couple of years before. And I was racked with guilt about the idea that I was a poet now, that I was relatively helpless to help the people who were going to be hurt by this. And now it's 2024, bad things have continued to happen and may continue and will continue to happen at a faster pace. But now I think much more grounded in my identity as a poet and in this art form, because I feel like I see young people, they come to me and they're facing the forces that are every day trying to make us less human, and that are trying to get us to treat other people as less than human. And poetry, for better or for worse, is us at our most human. And you can see the hunger for that level of expression, for that level of connection wherever we go. So, thank you for being a community that upholds that spirit. So this poem is called A Guide to Usage Mine. I was spiraling after the 2016 election. I kept hearing the word mine, like a toddler yammering. Apologies to the parents of toddlers in the crowd. And it just became this kind of unbearably metallic sound. So this is A Guide to Usage Mine. It's based on 4 definitions of the word mine. A, pronoun. my, belonging to me. How should I define the limits of my concern, the boundary between mine and not mine, the chime of the pronoun like a steel ring cast over what I know, what I name, what I claim, what I own? The whine of the pronoun hones its bright edges to keenness, because there is power in the categorical that prides itself and plumps itself and proliferates till there is no room in here for anything but power, till there is no air in here, but there would be no need for air if you could learn to breathe in whatever I breathe out. B, noun 1. A pit or tunnel in the earth, from which precious stones or ores or coal are taken by digging or by other methods. Because the earth does not gleam with the shine of the noun, to dig into the earth is imperative. To use my fingers or else to fashion more rigid, more perdurable fingers that cut or delve or sift or shatter, because we are more evolved than animals, because to mine is not to burrow, because the earth is not for us to live in, because the earth is not precious in itself. The earth is that from which what is precious is taken. The earth is what is scraped away or blasted away or melted away from what my steel-tipped fingers can display or sell or burn. C, noun 2. A device intended to explode when stepped upon or touched, or when approached by a ship, vehicle, or person. My device redefined by intent, so thin-skinned this earth is untouchable. A sly simulacrum of innocence concealing an infinity of hair-trigger malice. The cry of the noun sealed in a concentric sphere that sheaths its lethal secret in silence. Unapproachable, it sings its unspeakable harvest in this field I have seeded with violence. D, verb. To dig away or otherwise remove the substratum or foundation of. To sap, to ruin by slow degrees or by secret means. To dig is to build dark dwellings of negative space, to knit a linked network of nothing. The seams of the seemingly solid unravel, the itch of erosion, the scratch of collapse, each absence the artifact of specific intention, an abscess, a crater, a honeycomb of dead husks. The home of the verb is founded on ruin. The crime of the verb hollows out prisons and graves. The rhyme of the verb tunnels from fissure to fracture, from factory to faction, from fault line to fate. This foundation is equal parts atom and emptiness. This sphere invades fractally by rhizome and root. What cement could salvage this crumbling concrete? Should I pledge my allegiance to unearthing or earth? Thanks. But again, back to poetry and to the poems that inspire us. This is a poem I wrote for an alum of this program, to the great Carl Phillips. And we were talking a little bit today in the class about mythology, and so this is one of my mythological poems based on the myth of Echo and Narcissus. Narcissus, of course, being, the typical self-obsessed person, shall we say, who falls in love with his own reflection and eventually pines away. Echo, the nymph who is in love with him and whose voice still haunts the hills, and who can speak only based on on what she hears. This is for Carl. Study of two figures, Echo, Narcissus. To force a flower sounds more violent than the process turns out to be. More a sequence of planned deprivations, fashioning a little well of want. Any force, such as it is, inheres in this excess of intentionality, the way one might set a table or bait a trap. It's an American tendency to treat such deliberateness, such care as itself proof of guilt, premeditation as what tips the scales from mere mishap into crime. Meanwhile, the flower wakes, as if alone, knowing no different between a natural or built environment, knowing only its own desire, but not that there should be something other than itself to desire. The water it can dimly sense but never touch on pain of rot. The sun, a theorized absence it mistakes for purpose or for self, as if purpose and self could even be differentiated at this early stage, for the flower is childish, endlessly so, lacking roots, lacking gratitude, its whole being one ever more pallid, ever more drawn out throat, as if trying to climb out of its own earthliness through its single-minded focus on what it wants. I want I, the mirror that makes two out of one, the water you maintain at a level just out of reach, assiduously, because to gratify its desire would be to spoil the innocence that is the point of all your carefully calibrated effort, the innocence you think enviable in its centripetal self-regard, your cultivation of an unslaked want that reflects your mirror image wanting, this denial that will end for only one of you in an outburst the color of jealousy, star-shaped like triumph, or like the urge to hurt. Okay, again, on the subject of myth, I've been a Greek mythology nerd since I could walk, basically. And one of the things that caused me to revisit myth in this collection is I was thinking about our urge to other, right? And the othering that has gone on through Western civilizations. One of the great others of Western civilization is, of course, the figure of the Asian. Asia being a Greek word, referring at the time to those people over there where we have colonies. One of those colonies was Phrygia, which is in present-day Turkey. Two of the figures from Phrygia are characters in these poems, the satyr Marsyas, who was, is the subject of one of the great myths of hubris, but which, if you understand Marsyas as a colonial figure, in competition, who dared to try to emulate a Greek figure, takes another political dimension. Marsyas, for the Roman, in the Roman Republic, becomes a figure of what is known as parrhesia, speaking truth to power. He is known as a figure of anti-imperial resistance, and it's in that spirit that I write my Marsyas poem. Marsyas, for those who don't know, is a satyr who, so the goddess Athena, moving back one step, Pan creates a set of pipes. The goddess Athena finds these pipes, decides to play them, thinks she sounds really good, but looks in a mirror and realizes that her cheeks are all puffed out. She doesn't like the way she looks. And so she tosses aside the pipes. The satyr Marsyas picks up the pipes, plays them, thinks, hey, he sounds more than good. He challenges the god Apollo, god of light, god of music, to a contest. Marsyas, of course, loses the contest, and in punishment, he is flayed. He's skinned alive. So this is my Marsyas after. Dust loves me now, along with leaflets, plastic bags, anything unattached, anything looking for somewhere to stop, something to emblazon. Too painful to brush them off, the day's adhesions, too much a reenactment. I float in my tub of blood-warm water, element of indecision. If only it could be my habitat, if only the sawtoothed air didn't insist on its own uninterrupted necessity. I hate it, but lacking skin, I've lost my capacity for scorn. That was my failing. Not excess of pride, but that stooping to pick up their accoutrements, as if emulation could engender equality. I stain everything I touch. It all stains me. My raw surface is an unlidded eye, each stimulus its own white-hot knife, but why would I submit to be resheathed? To lessen pain? What used to distinguish me is already defeated, limp trophy flag of conquest. Now I could be like them if I chose. But the acidulated rain imposes a least common denominator, democracy. It scours away the pigments they use to humanize their marmoreal self-regard. Their eyes gone dull as the calluses I would suffer forever rather than become. Okay, and then one last Greek mythology figure. This is the figure of Midas, of course, the king of Phrygia, who, according to some versions, is the son of Cybele, who is an Asian goddess who is kind of perceived to be threatening at the time the Greek pantheon. So Midas in the Golden Touch myth, as told in Ovid, he asks for a boon from the gods and is granted his wish, which is to turn anything he touches to gold, with predictably tragic results. When the myth comes to America, Nathaniel Hawthorne takes it over, and he adds a little girl to the myth, a daughter who he calls Marigold, who becomes bound up in the tragic consequences of the myth. This study of two figures, Midas, Marigold. Everything he touches turns yellow. We are meant to understand this as a form of death. Death is a wish to improve one's surroundings, which is to say, to be dissatisfied with one's surroundings is a form of death. To be dissatisfied with one's child, to wish to improve one's child, is to wish its death, her death. The dead child is unchanging, therefore beautiful, which is why we say that that death is the father of beauty. He created her, then he created her again. His tears gild his gaze. They harden as they hit the ground. They are tribute scattered at her perfected feet. Unlike other forms of grief, they are durable, portable, a currency they can be exchanged for other beautiful or useful things. His weighty head lifts, a sunflower at mid-morning. The air glitters with particulate light. He takes a deep breath in, aspiration. A nebula of gold stars swarms into his open mouth. Gold spangles the moving darknesses of his blood, his lungs. Even the rivers in this country pave their streets with gold. I'll read one short poem. This is to, this was based on, this I wrote right after Brexit, and seeing all of those billboards across Britain that had the single word leave on them, and thinking that leave is also for a tree to put forth leaves, and thinking about the way in which this country and other countries regard immigrants. And this is dedicated to Martha Collins. Leave. Because it is to create an acute angle, an angle shaped like a wedge. Because it is to give birth to what you already know to be expendable after it is cleaned, after it has fed you, because you are enriched by even its deterioration, because the join might seem slender like a throat, because the bud might seem tender like a bud, but in this tenderness you do not share anything. Because even the join is also a jam, a harbinger of scab, a rust-red portal that shuts down what it depletes, that shuts out the obsolete, because you keep what is inside from seeping out, because you keep what is outside from slipping in, because in the singular and as a noun, you are a form of formal permission, as in, why don't you make like a tree and... Okay, so continuing with the nature theme of these poems, this is a poem about magpies. I became really fascinated, unhealthily fascinated with magpies. Magpies, you know, in the European tradition are kind of a thief, bling obsessed, a hoarder, attracted to shiny objects. You've heard all of the stories. These turn out to have no scientific basis whatsoever. They were actually thought to be vampiric for a while, like they would pick ticks off of animals, and the herders thought that they were drinking the animal's blood, so that there was a bounty placed on the American magpie that almost drove it into extinction. But in the East, in East Asian traditions, the magpie is considered to be a harbinger of good luck, a friend to lovers, and is a traditional symbol of Korea. So this is Parable of the Magpie and the Mirror. A certain scientist had a cage and took a magpie and put the magpie in the cage. And the scientist watched the magpie in the cage. And after a time, the scientist said, It is said that the magpie is the wisest of all birds. I will set a test for the magpie, and if the magpie pass the test, therefore will I know it is my equal. The scientist took a tall mirror, therefore, and placed the mirror in the cage, and the scientist watched the magpie in the cage. The magpie in the cage looked at the magpie in the mirror. The magpie in the mirror looked at the magpie in the cage, and the scientist watched and wondered and said, how will I know whether the magpie in the cage sees that the magpie in the mirror is its own true self rather than another identical magpie? For I cannot read the black lacquered eye of the magpie, neither can I parse the jagged scribble of its voice. Therefore will I mark the magpie and observe. If the magpie see the mark in the mirror, and if it remove the mark on its body, therefore shall I know the magpie knows its own true self, even as I know myself. And the scientist took therefore the magpie and placed a yellow sticker on the magpie's black neck, and placed the yellow sticker so the magpie could not see it, except that the magpie see the yellow sticker on the magpie in the mirror. And the scientist watched the magpie in the cage. And the magpie in the cage looked at the magpie in the mirror, and the magpie in the cage reached up with its black claw and tore off the yellow sticker and crushed it in its claw and let the sticker fall to the soiled newspaper at the bottom of the cage. And now the magpie spoke and said, scientist, I submitted when you placed me in this cage, and then I said, this scientist therefore will know me as an equal. And scientist, I submitted when you placed a mirror in my cage, and then I said, this scientist therefore will know me as an equal. But now, scientist, you have marked me with this yellow sticker, and to this marking I do not submit. But because I do not submit, you know therefore that I know myself. And you know me, therefore, to be your equal. So now, scientist, you must release me from this cage. And the scientist said, not unkindly, for the scientist did not mean to be unkind. Not so, magpie, for you have known yourself in the mirror, and you've seen yourself marked with the yellow sticker, and you have torn the yellow sticker from your neck. And therefore you have passed the test by which I know you as an equal. But because you are an equal, you must be marked with a yellow sticker in order to leave this cage. One other short magpie parable. So the magpie has given its name to a disease since it's thought that the magpie is attracted to shiny things. Pica is a disease where people will have a compulsion to eat things that have no nutritional value, like pebbles or clay or bits of tinfoil, things like that. It's often an affliction of pregnant women, and the magpie's scientific name is Pica pica. Parable of the magpie's name. Who was it who taught you to want what will not feed you? That you cannot make a house by eating a wall. Okay, one last poem, but it is a long one. This is the last poem in the book. It is based on a piece of Korean history. In the 18th century, there was a crown prince named Crown Prince Sado. And Saro, he was the crown prince. He marries a woman who becomes known as Lady Hyegyong, and he has a son who is known as the grand heir. And then Saro goes homicidally insane. He rapes and kills dozens of courtiers. And because he is the crown prince, there's a limit to what can be done about the situation. His person is considered sacrosanct. And if the king is to execute him or exile him or condemn him as a criminal, then the grandson, the grand heir, will also be tainted by association, and there will be no heir, and the country will have a crisis. So what the king does is he asks Sado to appear before him and to apologize for his crimes, which Sado does, and then the king asked for a rice chest to be brought. And a rice chest is, you know, what it sounds like. It's a box. It's about 4 foot by 4 foot by 3 foot. It holds rice. And he asked Sado to get into the rice chest. And Sado does. And eventually the king has the rice chest bound with rope. Grass is heaped on top for some reason. And about 8 days later, Sado dies. Detail of the rice chest. In the 2015 Korean film The Throne, the rice chest sits in the center of the vast symmetrical courtyard of Changgyeongung Palace. The film is called The Throne in English. In Korean, it is called Sado. A Korean-speaking audience would be presumed to know in advance who Prince Sado was. An English-speaking audience is presumed not to have this knowledge. Although this is a historical film, for a Korean-speaking audience, the well-known story functions as mythology at the level of symbol. For an English-speaking audience, the unknown story functions as narrative at the level of plot. There is an I in this poem. I know who Prince Sado was. I can read the Hangul word Sado, but I do not speak Korean. I am a member of the English-speaking audience. I know about Prince Sado from the memoirs of Lady Haegyeong, 1805, but I know about the memoirs of Lady Haegyeong from Margaret Drabble's The Red Queen, 2004. Margaret Drabble's The Red Queen is about Lady Haegyeong, but Lady Haegyeong was never a queen, nor is she associated with the color red. The title is misleading. The title of the film, The Throne, is also misleading. The film does not focus on the throne, it focuses on the rice chest. Like a magnifying glass, the stone courtyard focuses the gaze on the rice chest. The gaze increases in intensity and heat. July temperatures in Seoul average 84 degrees Fahrenheit with average humidity of 78%. I have been to Seoul in July. I have worn hanbok on a summer day, but only once. I've never seen a rice chest. The rice chest is a functional object and stands in contrast to the highly decorative architecture of the palace courtyard. Its plainness renders it inscrutable, impenetrable. Because of its oversized lid, the rice chest appears top-heavy, charged with kinetic potential. On its 4 small feet, it seems to be crouching on its haunches, to be hunkering down. Hunker down is a Scottish term that refers to squatting on the balls of one's feet, low to the ground but in readiness. It implies an apprehensive stasis, tense with the potential for sudden movement, poised to flee or to attack. I have hunkered down, but only once. Midway through the film, the rice chest is bound with thick rope with a knotted webbing of 4 or 5 thicknesses of coarse fibrous rope. The quantity of rope exceeds the function of the rope to such an extent that the rope binding seems decorative, symbolic. I have been bound with rope, but only once. There is something almost comic about such an excess of rope to bind a single imprisoned and dying man, the way there is something almost comic about a circle of guns pointed at a single unarmed man. I say almost comic rather than actually comic, because although these images provoke the same pent-up tension as suppressed laughter, I do not know who would find either of these images funny. After it is bound, the lid of the rice chest is heaped with grass. For a Korean-speaking audience, the grass-covered rice chest would resemble a traditional grassy burial mound, would evoke ancestral tombs, or even the prehistoric dolmens, which feature massive rocks perched on 4 small feet. I have seen the grassy burial mounds of my ancestors, but only once. For me, the rope-clad, grass-covered rice chest resembles a barbarian idol. According to the online etymology dictionary, the word barbarian comes originally from the Greek, meaning any non-Greek, and carries a derogatory connotation, those who speak a language different from one's own. When I say barbarian, it means I find the rice chest foreign, inscrutable, although it is Korean. Koreans speak a language different from my own. In the film, the walls of the rice chest are made of thick planks with chinks between them that admit slim shafts of light, drips of water. But the walls of Korean rice chests are made of solid panels of wood. Planks with chinks between them would admit pests, especially insects, into the rice chest. Such a rice chest design would not be functional. Partway through the film, we see a multi-legged insect enter the rice chest through a chink between the boards. The single insect is followed by a horde of identical multi-legged insects wriggling through the chinks in the walls. We understand the insects to be a hallucination of the dying Prince Sado. Their function is symbolic, the danger of allowing chinks in the walls. In the film, through the chinks in the walls, Prince Sado is able to see and to speak to his dog and to his 10-year-old son, the grand heir. But in fact, these incidents never took place. They are not hallucinations, but fabrications of the filmmakers, just as the multi-legged insects, the chinks in the walls of the rice chest, are fabrications of the filmmakers. The chinks allow the gaze to penetrate what would otherwise be impenetrable, to penetrate the inscrutable, barbaric figure of the rice chest, to reach the human inside. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is familiar to both Korean and English-speaking audiences, Tom Snout, a rude mechanical, plays the part of a wall that features a crannied hole or chink. The joke is that a human being portrays an inhuman object, since only an inhuman object would feature such a chink. I do not know who would find this joke funny. When asked to show me thy chink, Tom Snout holds up 2 fingers. I have seen boys hold up 2 fingers. Calling me a chink, they would place their 2 fingers at the corners of their eyes, stretching their eyes into narrow slits through which it must have been difficult to see. They found this joke funny. I have seen men hold up 2 fingers. They would use their tongues to penetrate the chink between their fingers, rendering the gesture obscene. The tongue thrust between the fingers reads as sexual, whereas an outthrust tongue without the fingers would be merely rude. Neither gesture is intended to be funny. Both the boys and the men would use their 2 fingers to symbolize my body, a body that without a chink might seem impenetrable. The primary meaning of the English word chink is a split or crack, a narrow fissure or valley. Chink also has a racially derogatory meaning, referring to a Chinese person, or by extension to any East Asian person, since an English-speaking person using a racially derogatory term would not be expected to differentiate among East Asian people. I have asked boys to differentiate among East Asian people. Upon being called a chink, I would say, "You're so stupid, I'm not a chink, I'm a gook." The Korean-American comedian Margaret Cho later used a similar statement as a punchline to a joke. I find this joke funny, and some members of a Korean-speaking audience might find this joke funny. I do not know whether other members of an English-speaking audience would find this joke funny. The term gook was used by English-speaking soldiers to refer to Korean people during the Korean War. It was later used by English-speaking soldiers to refer to Vietnamese people during the Vietnam War, since English-speaking soldiers do not differentiate among East Asian people. The term gook may derive from the Korean word for American, migook. Hearing Korean people say this word, English-speaking soldiers thought the Korean people were calling themselves gooks, migook, and followed suit. The word migook in Korean literally means beautiful country. Migook is a transliteration of the Chinese characters Maekwo, which also mean beautiful country. I know how to pronounce Migook, but not Maekwo. There are several accounts of why Maekwo came to mean American. Some claim it's a simple phonetic approximation. Others claim that Maekwo was selected out of several possible phonetic approximations by 19th century American missionaries and then made official in the 1901 Boxer Protocol. I do not know which account is true. All commentators seem to agree that neither Korean people nor Chinese people literally believe that America is a beautiful country. But both Korean people and Chinese people must call America beautiful in order to speak its name. Neither Korean people nor Chinese people refer to themselves as gooks or chinks. Neither Korean people nor Chinese people refer to themselves as Korean or Chinese. Korea is an English word which seems to derive from a mispronunciation of the name of the Goryeo dynasty by Silk Road traders and was first recorded by Marco Polo. China is an English word which seems to derive from a mispronunciation of the name of the Qin dynasty by Silk Road traders and was first recorded by Marco Polo. I have said Marco Polo's name in a game that requires you to say his name many times. I do not know the origin of the game. Because of the R's and L's, Marco Polo would be a difficult name for Korean speakers to say, but I am not a Korean speaker. I have called myself a gook many times. I have called myself a chink only once, when a white high school friend used the term in conversation, then stopped, realizing her gaffe. Don't worry, I said. I know what you mean. X is such an FOB. What's an FOB? She asked. Fresh off the boat, I said. I may be a chink, but at least I'm not an FOB. We laughed together to relieve the tension, although I do not think either of us found my joke funny. I used the term FOB to show that I considered X to be foreign, a barbarian. I called myself a chink to make myself seem more American. Fresh Off the Boat was my white husband's favorite television show during the time we were married. When we watched it, I hoped that laughing at the pushy Chinese immigrant mother on the show would lessen his dislike of my pushy Korean immigrant mother. I hoped that allowing my white husband to treat my parents as endearingly foreign, fresh off the boat, like the endearingly foreign TV family of Fresh Off the Boat, would make myself seem more American. None of the actors in Fresh Off the Boat are fresh off the boat. Nearly all of them were born in America. By pretending to be foreign, they make English-speaking audiences feel more American. My parents are not fresh off the boat. They have been in America for more than 50 years. They speak both Korean and English. A television is a box that allows us to put people inside it. The television is sometimes called an idiot box, from the Greek for private person, from idios, meaning one's own. But those inside the box have no privacy. We put the inscrutable into a box so they may be scrutinized. I made X inscrutable. I put X into the box. I made my parents inscrutable. I put my parents into the box. I decorated the box so it seemed foreign, barbaric. I made the box inscrutable so it seemed like a distant ancestor. I buried it so it seemed like a grave. I made a chink in the box that the gaze could penetrate. I stayed outside the box. I treated what was inside the box as a joke. I was the English-speaking audience. I watched Fresh Off the Boat on the idiot box. I watched The Throne on the idiot box. In The Throne, a parent puts his son in the rice chest. After the son's death, the rice chest is forced open. After the son's death, his mouth is forced open. 3 spoonfuls of rice are forced into his mouth, rice that might have kept him from starving to death in the rice chest. After the son's death, a name is forced into his mouth. The name is Sado, a name which has meaning for Korean-speaking audiences. I have said Sado's name many times. The son never called himself Sado. There was never a chink in the rice chest. No one could see into the rice chest. There is a you in this poem. You are a member of the English-speaking audience. I let you see into the box, into what is private, into what is foreign, into what is inscrutable, into what has been buried. I am the chink in the box. Thank you.